I'm Matthew. I work in TV development, and until now, I have never watched Survivor.
And I'm David, and I've been covering Survivor since season one over 23 years ago.
Usually, this podcast is dedicated to the traitors, but David and I have joined forces to take a detour and cover the new season of Survivor UK. Each week, we are going to give you a new twist on covering Survivor by not just recapping the two episodes, but looking at both of them from our two very different points of view. So, whether you're new to Survivor, like me, or a veteran of watching many seasons, we'll have you covered.
So, for those of you who may not already know me, I initially wrote about Survivor online way at the beginning. Expanded into newspaper columns, had my own reality TV websites for about a decade. And I'm probably most well known for having written up a set of rules to help people play and win Survivor. These rules have been printed out and snuck to Survivor seasons for pregame studying by a number of different players. So in the US, at least, the players sometimes will review these and do their best to play according to these. And then each week, back when I had my websites, I would write a column about why the player lost, ending, of course, the season with why someone won. A few years after my websites went down, those particular columns were reborn into a podcast on the Rob Has a Podcast network, and I've now done those for over 8 years for US Survivor. In addition, I have been doing 1 to 2 minute mini Why Blank Lost videos for TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram for several seasons of International Survivor, and I'll be doing them again this season too. But that's not what we're doing here. We're looking at it from these two very different points of view. And we start off right away as we roll into Survivor UK. And as I watched it, just the intro of it was geared towards, well, people like you, Matthew. I felt, people who didn't maybe, really know the game, but knew a little bit, like, they had to explain how if you lose the immunity challenge, the tribe will have to go sacrifice one of their players. And so I was wondering what your thoughts are on that part of the intro anyway.
I knew what I was in for roughly. I still didn't understand all of the mechanics of the game, but I had a pretty good impression of what I was headed for. This Survivor reminds me of another couple of TV shows actually here in the UK. It reminds me of a show called Shipwrecked. I don't know if there is a US version of this. Shipwrecked was a reality show, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A bunch of generally 20-year-olds on an island. Funnily enough, I looked it up to check it out. Started the same time as the original Survivor on UK TV. So it was like 2000, 2001, lasted a few years, and it was pure reality. There was no strategy, there was no gameplay. It was just observing a bunch of young attractive people on an island with nothing but coconuts and matches. It then returned in 2006, and it was sort of renamed Shipwrecked Battle of the Islands, and that was very much like, from my memory, what Survivor is. So it reminded me of that straight away. But also just to sort of give a little bit more background here. I work for a TV company here in the UK, and I guess a little anecdote. Recently, I was able to meet one of the executive producers of this new season of Survivor, Stephen Lovelock from Remarkable. Remarkable is the production company who are making this season, or who made this season. And Stephen Lovelock gave us a little bit of background about how they approached making the show this time. He said that they very much based it on the Australian version of Survivor. Again, to me, this means nothing. So I was nodding along, going, yes, cool, okay, Australian Survivor. I don't know what you're talking about. But that's what he told us. And he also told us that the contestants, the participants, are generally very, very savvy about Survivor. Most of the people who applied and who ended up on the show, they know the how it works. They've watched different international versions. In fact, he told us this story. I think I can tell you. I don't think I'm breaking any rules here. He told us that as soon as they landed on the beach at the very beginning of the first episode, the players began rummaging in the sand and immediately looking for immunity idols. And production had to tell them, we have not hidden anything. You can stop looking. And even then, they didn't believe the producers. They were like, nope. And they were looking through bushes and palm trees. Again, at this point, I don't know what an immunity idol is. I had no idea what they're talking about. Now I know a little bit more, having watched these two episodes. Yes,
Well,
I got from that meeting and from my memories of the original Survivor 20 odd years ago on TV, I know roughly what it's all about.
yeah, it's interesting that you say there were a lot that many of them had studied and were familiar. I can pick up probably on who some of those are and who some of those aren't.
Yeah.
I think that one of the people who left probably is one, at least one of the people who left was one who didn't do that. But even so, even in today's US Survivor, we're 45 seasons in. Most of the people there are fans, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you will still get people who come on and they're like, I want to change the game and play with honesty, loyalty, and integrity. And it's like, yeah, that's a different game and you're going to lose. So, uh, I could definitely see some of the people in this season coming in and, I'll just jump ahead. I think that Sabrina is probably one of them. She, I think, viewed this as more of a physical game. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she has viewed, but the thing is also that people who just watch. So this is really inside baseball here. Do you even know what that phrase means? I used it once before.
I figured it out.
Okay, so it's really in the weeds here. That there are debates between what a fan is, what a super fan is, what a super duper fan is. Um, And so, a fan might just be someone who watched every season and has seen every episode. But if they haven't listened to podcasts, if they haven't read blogs, if they haven't, done those things, they only know what they see on TV, and maybe they don't quite get everything. And then you've got the super fans who go beyond that. And then the super duper fans are the ones that are really, they're on Reddit every day. They're on Twitter. They're reading every interview and, like I said, sneaking my rules into the game. And so it's this very different sets of things. And especially now, as we're getting what I've been calling the pandemic viewers. So when there was no TV on, and all of US Survivor was available for streaming, lots of people just sat down and watched 40 seasons.
Yeah.
And they thought that, oh my gosh, now I'm a super fan, which some of them were. Some of them got it. Some of them just went according to what they saw. And in doing it such a short time frame is not enough to truly absorb the game. And so, I only go into this kind of tangent here because I think that we will see that along the way here, that, some people will really be the super fans and some were like, oh, it's a physical competition. Cool.
Do the super duper fans go to conventions and dress up as their favorite characters?
They will be this week. Yes.
I was kidding.
The other network that I podcast for, Rob has a podcast. They have live shows where they do
Wow.
live. They have former contestants on stage to help analyze the game, and
Hardcore.
lots of people come.
I laugh now.
Pre-pandemic.
I cut to 12 months from now. It'll
Yeah,
be me
yeah,
dressed up
exactly.
as Sabrina
Yeah.
in the audience.
And so, yeah, they fill, comedy clubs or movie theaters or whatever. And so I went to a number of these, pre-pandemic also, and met a lot of Survivor players. And I mean, I also, dating back years and years, I went to some of the finales when they used to be televised. I snuck into finale post parties. So, I've been doing this for a while. The reason they're dressing up this time is because it's Halloween. They're having a costume party. So normally you don't really see them dressing up, but you
Okay.
asked that question and it was just perfectly placed for, the Halloween episodes of this.
Yes.
So yeah, that will be in Los Angeles for anyone who happens to be out there. But you need tickets, So now you mentioned the Australia Survivor influence on this, and I can definitely see it. The intro packages that they have, where suddenly they're interviewing someone, and suddenly we cut to them in their everyday life. That is very much Australian Survivor.
Okay.
Some other things like the early challenges emphasizing pure strength.
Mm-hmm.
That is also very Australian Survivor. Now, lately in US Survivor, you've needed a lot of strength as well, but not to the extent of literally standing there and holding weights, until you drop. So that is very, like I said, very Australian Survivor also. And, there were just other things that I saw as we went in. Now, one thing that was very US Survivor originally was Joel's intro. And I liked it. This was, these words would send chills down my spine at the beginning of every season. And so Joel still said it. He goes, 34 days, 18 people, 1 survivor. And it upset me quite a bit when Jeff Probst stopped saying that when they dropped from 39 days to 26 days. So I was very happy that, Joel put that in there. Now, 34 days is an interesting length because, like I said, US Survivor used to be 39, then dropped to 26 the first season after their COVID gap year. And now it seems like they're sticking with it. They're just, they're not going back to 39 anytime soon, if ever. Meanwhile, Australia goes longer, like in the most recent seasons between 47 and 50 days.
And in Australia, because of the country it is, do they film in Australia? I mean, I'm guessing US, they fly off to some tropical place.
In US, they used to fly off all over the place. And the seasons used to be named either according to their location or according to some sort of theme. Like there was David's versus Goliaths, as a theme. But otherwise, it used to be, there was Survivor Borneo, Survivor Thailand, Survivor Africa. And now they've laid down roots in Fiji. The Fiji government apparently, gives them some good tax breaks, and they've worked, they have a thriving community there of employees, staff, and so they don't show any signs of leaving. So now they just number them. We are on Survivor 45. Which makes it really hard to keep track of in your mind. It's like, wait, was it 41 or 42 or so, but what are you going to do? That's what they're doing. I mean, that's, Big Brother in the US anyway, has always been numbered. We're on Big Brother 25. So, so I guess Survivor just, decided to go the same way. And so, yes, obviously Fiji, a very tropical location. Australia, to get back to yours, used to go all over during the, worst of COVID years when they were filming. They just went to the Australian outback or someplace there, which people
They've got lots of it.
Right. Yeah. and Survivor South Africa did something similar. They just, went away from the cities. And so, the US, I would say, has certain spots like that. We don't have jungle per se that I can think. I mean, I guess if you go to the Florida Everglades, but
Hawaii?
But,
Hawaiian jungles, is that a thing?
Well, yes, but I meant mainland. Sorry. And so, but Survivor and CBS just didn't want to do it, probably in large part because all their equipment was in Fiji. And so, they just They just took a year off, basically. Um, so, as far as the reason for the length, I suspect it's just because you have fewer viewers in Australia than in the US, and therefore you need to lengthen the time to make it, balance out monetarily. Plus, they are like 3 episodes a week in Australia. So, um, and they're long episodes too.
Yeah.
I also noticed that the winner of Survivor UK only gets £100,000,
How
whereas
much how much is it in US?
$1 million,
Oh,
not pounds,
wow.
obviously. Now it's been a million since the very beginning. So someone who wins $1 million now is not winning the same amount of money comparatively as someone who won it 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Well, there's
only time
something sorry, on you go.
I was going to say it was in Survivor Winners at War, which was Survivor 40. It was an all winner season. That was 2 million. Other than that, it's always been a million.
I think in the UK, as long as Survivor remains on BBC, if it remains,
Mm-hmm.
the prize fund will probably never go much beyond this. And you probably know a little bit about this. BBC are fairly conservative with prize funds. Most game shows on BBC don't give away large amounts of money. Some game shows and quiz shows and competition shows don't give away anything on BBC because it's funded by sort of public money. They will never give away £1 million. Even £100,000 for BBC is quite a big deal. In fact, the Traitors had a big prize fund too, but that was also unusual for BBC. And part of the reason the Traitors was able to give away so much is because it was a co-production with NBC, so it was sort of funded partly from somewhere else. But
Right.
yeah, BBC not hugely into giving away taxpayers money for competitions like this.
I mean, if you can get the viewers and, for 100,000, why spend 900,000? If you can get the viewers and the players. I mean, Survivor South Africa was, I think I did, and don't 100% quote me on this, anyone. I think I did the math, and it was like a prize of like the equivalent of like $35,000
Yeah.
US, something like that. I know that Traders New Zealand was like $35,000 US. So
Yeah.
I may be confusing the two there, but it was not, nearly what, we're used to, I'm used to in the US. Now, we've talked about all of that, and we're like 15 minutes into this podcast, and we even haven't started talking about the episode. I do want to say, Joel was right when he introduced. He said you could be young or old, small or muscular, and some people look at it and say, well, it's a game that involves physical challenges, but the thing is, it's mostly about the strategic and social games, and I think we'll see that in both of the eliminations this week. The tribes are Calaton, which is in orange, and La Nena, which is blue. And to open on the boat there, Joel talks to a few of them. And then we have the marooning. Now, it's funny because when we were preparing for this podcast, before we, watched anything, I mentioned that I had seen a preview of the marooning on social media, and your response was, the what?
Yeah, what's a marooning? I'm a what?
Yeah. And so that's when, they just have to get as many supplies off the boat onto their raft and then race to the beach. And in this case, light a big fire to burn through a rope holding a crate of supplies. And of course, the first tribe to do it won those supplies plus flint plus what they got from the boat, and the other doesn't even get the stuff that they got from the boat. And in fact, we later find out that the winner gets the contents of what the other tribe got from the boat too. So it's funny because there were a couple times people were fighting over stuff, and in the end it didn't matter as long as that stuff got onto some raft. The winner was going to get it.
Yeah. I had a few observations at this
Mm-hmm.
marooning challenge. Number one, every time Joel says Calaton, I think he's saying Peloton, so I
Yeah,
was very confused. I thought there was some sort of sponsorship deal I didn't know about. Uh, Also, how did he get to shore so fast? What they're on the boat. They all dive off on these rafts. They reach shore, and Joel's just standing there. I thought this has ruined the illusion for me.
he at
Uh,
one point said, "Oh, I've got to go over there too." I thought he was going to jump in and swim with them for a minute, but he must have had a motorboat off to the side, and he just while they're over there struggling and rowing, he's off in his little motorboat getting to the beach. So,
yes. Uh,
um,
and maybe, I mean, this might be a point for international listeners just to mention a little bit about Joel. Who is Joel
mhm,
Dommett? Why is he presenting the show? So, Joel is a pretty, I would say, a household name at this point in the UK. Most famous, probably right now, for being the host of The Masked Singer, big primetime show here on weekends. Joel used to actually be an actor and he did stand up comedy. I saw Joel Dommett about 10 years ago doing stand up for free at the Edinburgh Fringe in a small room. And at that point, I kind of had seen him on TV. I didn't really know anything about him. But Joel, sort of, his career was catapulted maybe 5 years ago. He was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here as a contestant, and he was the runner up. He came in second place, but was so popular that from there he just ended up landing lots of TV presenting gigs and is now this hugely famous name. And that's essentially why one of the main reasons he was chosen as the host for Survivor is because of his connection to I'm a Celebrity, because it's sort of, it's jungle, it's survival, it's a similar world. So that's how he has ended up as the host of this show, I guess. And they thought he would be good at being funny and
mhm.
making comments off the cuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's where he's definitely a bit different from other hosts. Is he, you can see the comedian in him. I mean,
Yeah.
Jeff Probst would never stand there eating a banana while these people are running around, or later, or joking about tetanus, or later making a bunch of puns and things like that. You know, normally the host announces what's going on, much like he did, but and they will put some opinion in there, like you have to dig faster, you're falling way behind, or they'll yell at them, but yeah, not a whole lot of like punning going on typically. So
Yeah.
he definitely brings that change.
Yeah.
Uh
Again, I also noticed during this marooning challenge that, yeah, the players generally seem to really know the game. Like they understand how important everything is more than I
mhm.
did. So when Calaton lose, I actually felt quite sorry for them. And Joel throws the lighter to the other team, and he says it's the most important thing in Survivor. And Sabrina is going wild. And I know it's probably very obvious, but I had just written, David, why is fire the most important thing in Survivor?
Well, fire is life in Survivor. I mean, it used to be that you literally couldn't drink until you got fire because the water was not drinkable. You had
Oh
to
yeah,
boil
yeah,
your
of
water.
course.
Now, lately, US Survivor hasn't specifically said anything, but one tribe went without fire for way more than they could have gone without water. So I think that they now have a drinkable water source.
Yeah, they
Um,
must.
but like you can't, I mean, you've got raw rice and beans. You need to cook those. You can't cook them without fire.
Yeah,
You can't, if you happen to, catch fish or something else, you can't, like I said, you can't cook it. Plus, on a beach, now I don't know how it is in the Dominican Republic, but on Fiji, you think it's Fiji, it's tropical, it's hot. Uh, no, not all the time. On the beach at night, they get cold. And
yeah,
especially during the rainy season, they are cold and they are wet and they never dry out. And so, another reason you really need fire.
yeah. I mean, as the episode went on, it became
Hmm.
clear to me. I thought, oh, they really have nothing. Like
Yeah.
they, as it goes on, Joel says things like, "Team Carlton have gone 2 days without food,"
Hmm.
and I thought, is this real? Are they exaggerating? Like, is this? Oh, is this why it's called Survivor? Do people just die on this show? Like, has anyone ever died on Survivor?
Not that I'm aware of. People
Oh yeah.
have gotten medically evacuated for, usually it's a dehydration. Other people have injured themselves, hit their heads, fell off a
Okay.
rock that they were climbing, just, or even just fell down on the beach and
Yeah.
dislocated their shoulder.
Okay.
Some of these things are, as you'll see in, if they get to bigger challenges. I mean, there's already an injury. I mean, Ashley is already
Yeah.
injured, as we find out. So, so yeah, I mean, I mean, the current U.S. version had two people quit already.
Okay.
Now, there hadn't been anybody quit in a long time. And these two, one of them was a pandemic fan, and I don't think she ever really quite understood. The other has admitted that he made a mistake by quitting. He did something in the moment, and I, I talked about these things extensively elsewhere. But yeah, there are people. I mean, that was both of them were on the tribe that had no fire, no food for a long time.
Yeah. It's funny you talk about quitting. That I somewhere in my notes is I've made a note of the point where I would have quit. I'll
Yeah.
tell you when we get to it.
Okay. Now you called what he tossed to Lanena a lighter.
Oh, I just assumed that's what I couldn't really see what it
No, I
was.
think it was just flint. I think
Oh,
it's
okay.
flint. Now it looked better than the flint that U.S. Survivor gets, and I will say that as soon as they got that flint, they had fires started. Whereas on U.S. Survivor, if you don't, even people who have practiced with a flint sometimes go 8-10 hours and still can't get a fire started. Now, sometimes it's because there's been a rainstorm and there's nothing to light. It's all soaking wet.
Yeah. I don't know if we haven't decided if we're allowed to swear on this podcast or not, but I'm
Mm.
just going to do one of my early notes was how the fuck do these people know how to start a fire?
Well, you study it. I mean, there are people who I mean, especially on U.S. Survivor, because the host and executive producer Jeff Probst has implemented fire making as a way to advance from the final four to the final three,
Ah.
which most of us hate. But the point is, you have to know how to make a fire. So people practice. People order fire making kits on Amazon. They practice in their backyard, in their bathtub, wherever they can.
Okay.
And so, and even without that, it's something you should know how to do so that you can survive. Some people early on made fire using their glasses, using sticks. Now, I've never seen anyone try to make a fire using sticks the way Calaton was trying, just literally horizontally rubbing two sticks together.
Yeah.
I have never seen that before. I mean, normally when you're rubbing sticks, you're trying to focus on a specific point
Yeah.
to heat up, and they're like trying to heat up the whole
An
length
entire
of
log.
yeah. And well, it's no wonder it wasn't working. So
Yeah, at one point, one of them was like, it's warm. I
yeah,
thought that's just sunlight.
yeah. I mean, it could be friction, but it's not going to get beyond warm.
No.
So we've skipped around a little bit, but yes, obviously in Lanena won. They were behind on the raft, but then they managed to get a better fire. Uh, when they were sent. Oh, and also the other thing is, you saw the loads and loads of fruit they had, like just tons and tons of banana. I suspect most of that's going to go bad in the tropical weather because they're not
Yeah.
going to be able to eat like 8 bananas or something like that a day each. And I think it's just, in the tropical weather, you eat it or it's done. And so you don't want to eat all the fruit out there or it'll just go right through you. So, so they weigh, they have to watch what they eat. I mean, they may be nice and full and strong now, but just be careful. It was interesting to me how close the beaches seem to be, as they're flipping back and forth.
Yeah. I noticed that too. When they have these aerial shots, I thought,
right.
oh, they are very geographically close. Is there some sort of barrier to
Well,
stop them from just wandering to the other beach by accident?
that's what I wonder. I would have to think for these for since they are so close, there probably is. I mean, they always have producers with them, so at some point the producer's going to be like, "No, you can't go that way anymore."
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's been a few, one in particular that I can think of, maybe another one where one tribe didn't know what was going on an island. They were like, "Oh, that looks like an interesting place to go hunt for limes or something like that. Let's go there." So they rowed their boat over there, and they didn't know that the other tribe was there. So they're walking along, and they walk into their camp, and the other tribe's like, "What are you doing here?" So, so yeah, I would think with them being this close, they probably have, uh, some sort of, line drawn in there to prevent that from happening. But who knows? They may want to see if they do interact and find that amusing.
Mm.
Um, as we're moving along, we meet Lee the boxer, and
David,
also
could you understand anything Lee said?
a little bit. Yeah, I've watched enough UK television that I can usually pick it up pretty well.
I mean, I understood 95% of it, but I did think, I wonder if David will understand this man.
Yeah, I've been preparing for this my whole life, so just watching all these different shows, and so yeah, I was like, ooh, yeah, that is an accent there. Um, And so this was one of those intro packages I was talking about that, similar to Australian Survivor. And then we also met Pegleg, who is an older surf school operator. And by older, I mean like my age, almost exactly my age. And, in US Survivor, that's like ancient. But, he's hanging out with the rest of them here. So like we mentioned, they got fire quickly. But over at Calaton, things not so happy. And we meet, I think Lawrence is, yeah, we meet Lawrence, who is studying AI ethics at Cambridge and loves horses. And so I'm sure he's an early favorite of yours.
I wouldn't say that. I shouldn't say horrible bad things. Maybe at some point I end up speaking to Lawrence on this podcast or something. As soon as I saw Lawrence playing polo on a horse, I just thought, I have nothing in common with this man. Get him away from me. So not an instant fan. Maybe he'll win me over. Who knows?
I liked him. Just I thought he was funny in the show anyway, and so we'll see how that changes. At camp, we have Nathan, a fitness instructor. Couldn't tell that by looking at him. Says that some aren't helping much, and cut to Richard, and hint. But he doesn't want to lead and tell people what to do. And then we see Shy doing exactly that, as Jess complains about him to us, and we just see a lot. And then we meet Shy, who analyzes risk in the financial industry, and he tells us that he has the social skills for this game. Does he though? Does he really?
Yeah, we don't see lots of evidence of that in these two episodes.
Back at Lanena, Pegleg is cooking dinner. They already have a decent looking shelter. Now, one thing they did wrong, this is going to be a real nitpicky Survivor super duper fan thing. They used full bamboo rather than cutting them lengthwise. And if you cut them lengthwise, the U shape spreads out more. So you don't have that poking into your back as much. Now, It's possible that they didn't want to mess with that yet. They just wanted to get something set up and they'll do that later, or they just didn't know. But meanwhile, at Calaton, they just gave up. I don't understand how they couldn't get it done under Shy's guidance, but they gave up and put some stuff on the ground, which they later regretted because they found out that they were dinner for a lot of things that live on and under the ground.
Yes.
See, more of this is why it's called Survivor for you.
Yes, it starts to make sense. I mean, by the beginning of day two, this is the point where I wrote, I would be quitting now. Um, when we see them wake up and I see the bed in inverted commas that they slept on, and the fact that they'd been eaten by bugs overnight, I just wrote bye bye.
Well, yeah, and also, so the buffs that they have.
Yes.
Now I'm showing you one on video. People can't see that, of course, but uh, those when you sleep on Survivor, you have to cover your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth. And it's not your eyes and your ears so that you can sleep. It's so that things don't crawl inside while you are sleeping.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm out. I'm done.
There,
Goodbye.
there was a woman who a bug crawled into her ear, and there was a whole segment on it on the show one time trying to figure out how to get this bug out because it had just anchored itself in her ear. And so, yeah.
No, I recently read an article about a woman in Australia who they found this parasite in her brain, and it was the first time in any human being they'd that usually this parasite's found in dogs or something, and I've never been able to forget it. So
Oh,
that would be all I could think about in that scenario.
so that morning, of course, Lanena is partying. Calaton, not so much. Jess is already talking about not knowing it would be this hard. Now, I know you just said you'd quit, but it hasn't been 24 hours. And it's like you're already talking about how hard it is. Come on. And then we meet her and find out she's a fittings model, which I have never heard of before.
Me neither. Didn't know it
Okay.
was a thing.
Okay. So it looked like they put clothes on her and measure her. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm none the wiser. None
Yeah.
the wiser.
Um, so the tribes get their first tree mail. Now, had you ever heard of tree mail before?
No, I was like, tree what? A tree? Oh, it's a fake letterbox tacked to a tree. What is this?
It's tree mail. And Joel later says, in like I don't remember if it was episode 2 or late in episode. I think it was episode 2. He's like, "Oh, it sounds like email. I get it now." So, and remember, this started back in 2000 and they were calling it tree mail then. So,
Oh, they've always used that phrase then.
yes,
Okay.
including when it's not on a tree. Sometimes it's like been elsewhere just because maybe trees weren't around or they used something else. It was still tree mail.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
yeah. Yes, for anyone who's listening who may have found us here and not really know, it's where players get all their instructions in terms of when there's a challenge coming, what kind, whether it's reward or immunity, plus a clue about what it might entail. Now, a reward challenge is something like what happened in the marooning, where one tribe gets a prize that will help them in the game, whether it's like food or comfort or relaxation. This one will be for immunity, which means they don't have to go to tribal council and vote someone out. And boom, they get to the first challenge, immunity challenge. The winner will get the immunity idol. Now, you mentioned before, you mentioned before about the hidden immunity idol you hadn't heard of. Now, this immunity idol is a tribal idol. It's a representation of winning, and it doesn't really have any more significance other than that. This one looks like it was someone's kid's kindergarten art project.
Yeah. Is the idol always a bit of wood with some gold bits glued on it?
No, I mean, Survivor US has a whole huge art department where they design stuff like this, and they take, great pride in their designs. And so, no, this was just like, this was just so bad.
It made me think there was some intern who lied and said they had an art degree, and they were like, okay, let's give the intern the job of making the idol. And then some random newbie was like, what? And just shoved some glue on it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you said BBC isn't known for their
Their big
large
budget.
budgets, so they were probably like, who cares what this thing looks like? We'll just
Let's make it look rustic.
yeah, yes. So the first challenge is one that I have seen on previous different seasons. I think most recently on Australian Survivor. Um,
Ah,
each player has a weight to hold up, but it's a tribe challenge because there will be individual challenges later where someone has a weight. Now, those weights will be scaled to their own body weight.
okay.
These are not, probably because it's a tribe challenge. Um, and so if someone can't hold it, they can hand it off to someone else on their tribe. And then eventually someone's going to drop and that tribe loses. Now, the banter from Joel is similar to what we've seen on other seasons, though I still think he is looser and more fun than most. On Calaton, we lost Leilani pretty early. She handed off to the very muscular Nathan, who was clearly put next to her as strategy, because what we
Yeah.
don't see is they have time to strategize and figure things out ahead of time. So that was a smart move on their part. Lanena was really getting mouthy about how much they'd eaten and how Calaton should just give up. It's not. I mean, yeah, okay, yes, go team, yay! But you're gonna have to be playing with these people later. They were treating it like I was gonna say a soccer match, but I guess it's a football match.
Yeah, you've answered one of my questions already, but I do have a new question. So I was going to ask, is this a regular challenge from Survivor? But you said you've seen it before.
Yeah,
And therefore, I'm guessing the same kind of challenges often come up throughout seasons. We see sort of like recurring things.
yeah. I in the previews I saw one challenge that has been around for ages.
Okay.
And so yeah, there'll be a combination. The challenge, the immunity challenge in episode 2 that we'll get to here in a little while, it is, I mean, it's a variant on a theme, but it's not specifically something I've seen before.
Okay. It's on the Netflix show Physical 100. I don't know if you saw that. It's
No.
a sort of Korean reality competition show. It was really great fun. And one of the challenges right towards the end of that was very similar to this. The remaining contestants, yeah, it's the same thing. They're holding a clay model of their own bodies on these ropes. A little bit different because that's an individual game, and it was
Right.
just the last man standing wins. But I quite like the way this worked actually. That because I assumed when it started, it would be who's the remaining person, but actually it was, I guess, designed to be a little quicker than that. So it's just
Right.
as soon as one drops, that team has lost instantly.
Mhm.
And I like that they could pass to one another. I thought that was
Yes.
quite a cool element of the gameplay, so I liked it. But you said something a minute ago that made me think of something I hadn't realized. Do eventually are these tribes going to mix up and change?
Yes. So
Ah,
so
I
I
didn't know that.
don't know if there will be what we call a swap. And so a swap is where literally you can randomly just be reassigned to the other tribe.
Okay.
Um, Sometimes those happen, sometimes not. But eventually, yes, there will be a merge at, it's in theory about halfway through the game. It's usually a little less than halfway. And that's when it becomes all individual challenges.
Okay. So that's why antagonizing the other team is maybe not a great move.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So in the challenge itself, after about maybe a bit more than a half hour, Nathan was getting tired and handed off to Shy for a little bit. And then they swap back and forth to like give their hands the ability to, rest a little bit. Rachel was out of Calaton and handed off to Richard. And then Richard handed off to Matthew. Not both of them, but they were also swapping. Sabrina back on Ladena handed off to Lee. And there were, a few more of these swaps. Sabrina was cheering them on annoyingly from the bench after she bailed out.
Yes.
And several
So
players
annoying.
just wanted her to shut up. But
Yes.
yeah, but they didn't really say anything too well. I mean, what are they going to do? Yell over there? Shut up already. Uh, and then finally, Richard can't hold on to the two weights and Lanena wins. Uh, so it looks like, because of that, the initial target may be Leilani, the barista and cleaner. She's 45, which is unfortunately considered older on Survivor. She was first out of the challenge. And Richard is saying, yes, we have to keep the tribe strong. Now, this is something, that I've talked about over the years. If you're the guy or woman who caused the challenge to be lost, you should not be promoting the idea that you should keep the tribe strong. Because, yes, Leilani was out first, but you dropping is the image in everybody's heads.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although I was still, and again, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I was surprised. I just assumed, oh, she left first. Yeah, she didn't lose the challenge because someone took over. But I just thought, oh, she is going to go. I just assumed she would go. But I guess it doesn't work out that way. I suppose
it frequently does. It very frequently does.
Yeah.
In U.S. Survivor over the past couple of years, women have gone first almost every time, just because of the strength nature of things.
Yeah. But I guess Richard, he technically lost it and he didn't. I guess what ends up happening is they're annoyed at him because he dropped both of the things that he was holding without any kind of note. Like he could have tried to give a bit of warning or a heads up, and he just drops them without speaking, and it's done, and they couldn't have done anything about it. But
yeah, and that's really what it is, because I've gone back and rewatched that scene a couple of times, and he gets past, I think it's Matthew next to him. I could be wrong, but he gets past, the second one again as they're passing it back and forth, because the other guy is like, I can't do this anymore. I need to take it. But then, Richard he's kind of crouched down. Most of them are crouched down. And then he just kind of stands up and lets go almost with a flourish. And it doesn't look like someone who it just fell out of their hand. It looks like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And if he had time to do all of that, then at least according to Nathan, the fitness instructor, then he had time to try to hand it off again.
Yeah.
And so, there's probably something to that. I also think that Nathan wasn't real big fan of Richard from the start.
Yeah.
And so Nathan starts the ball rolling, and that's the other thing is on Survivor in the very first vote, you've only known each other a few days. If someone puts out a name and it's not your name, most of the time people are just like, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
And we even hear that when Shai goes up to vote. And he says, well, it sounds like the tribe has decided on you. Like, he's not even taking any responsibility for this. He's just like, and this is something we have encountered on the traders, in the early votes as well, sometimes in the not so early votes. But it's like, once people start jumping on someone else, you just back off and you're like, okay. And, Nathan did that. So we kind of jumped over the whole tribal council part. So they arrive at tribal council, they get their torches, they dip them in the fire. And they are told as long as they have fire, they're still in the game. But once it's snuffed out, so are they. But Joel missed one part of the saying, which I mentioned to you earlier, which is fire represents your life in the game. I even have a T-shirt right next to me that says that.
Before we go ahead with Tribal Council, I have to also just bring up something I noticed. 45 minutes into episode 1, we have our first love you from one one player to another. I checked the timestamp 45 minutes before someone tells someone else that they love them. They have just met each other. You don't love each other. Stop
I
it.
mean, it's 3 days in, man. It may be 45 minutes for you, but it's 3 days for them.
Okay, 3 days, sure. It's Tanuki says it to Richard, and I immediately clocked it and thought, "Stop! What? You just met him? Stop it!"
Yeah, that happens a lot. It's trauma bonding on
Yeah,
Survivor.
yeah.
We saw that on U.S. Survivor too. So, um, so what did you think of the whole tribal council situation?
So I mean, I figured out pretty quickly. Oh, this is like banishment and traitors. This is like nominating in Big Brother. Well, in UK Big Brother anyway. So I figured out what was going to happen. Although I was a little bit confused by something that one of the players says. So again, it's Tanuki. So the votes are secret. You walk over, you write down a name in secret, you fold it up, you put it in the little pot. But earlier, Tanuki said something that didn't make sense to me. She said, after telling Richard that she loved him, by the way,
Mhm.
she said almost instantly, she didn't want to vote for Richard in case he didn't end up then leaving and it would be awkward for her. And I thought, why would it be awkward for you if he doesn't know you voted for him? So am I missing something?
No, she was the one missing something.
Okay, okay.
Several times people said this in both episode 1 and episode 2. They're like, well, I don't want to vote for them because they'll come after me then. Well, it's like only if you or someone else tells them that you did
Yeah,
that. And the other thing is just make sure you have enough people voting for them that you don't have to worry about that then.
yeah, yeah. So that's fine. It confused me, and I wondered maybe they themselves have misunderstood. Maybe they have been watching the traitors and they thought it was some
They thought
sort
they
of
had to hold it
open,
up.
yeah, hold up your name, tell us who you voted for and why. So yeah, I thought something wasn't quite right there.
Yeah, it was interesting because I haven't thought about that. It's on the most recent episode of U.S. Survivor. There was a whole weird situation on a previous tribal council, and one person voted for this guy, and they come back, and he's like, "How did I get a vote? Who voted for me? Did you vote for me?" He said he didn't vote for me. Did you? And so he's trying to figure it out, and they're all just like sitting there quietly, like, "Nope, we didn't do it. Wasn't us."
Yeah.
But no, normally it's just not an issue.
Okay.
Um,
And I have one or two more questions
sure.
about tribal council, but I will ask them after the second one.
Oh, okay. So, so yeah, in the tribal council, of course, they discuss a number of different things, and like you noticed, they don't outright say who they're voting for, because that rarely happens. It's not like it's against the rules. People can say it, and they have in the past, but it's
Okay.
just the idea is to dance around it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you dance around it so much that you're trying to hide what you're planning to do. You're avoiding answering questions. You're obfuscating everything, just in case you want to trick someone. Now, that will come into play more once these hidden immunity idols come into play. But right now, still, you don't necessarily want people to know because then they can, try to counterattack. Um, Also, much like the Traders Roundtable, Tribal Council far longer than we're seeing on TV. It's at least an hour, 2 hours, something like that, depending on you know who's there and how many of them.
Yeah.
Um, so we there's Jess votes for Shy. So clearly she's not involved in any discussions at all because I think she's the only one. Richard votes for Leilani. And, we only see a couple of votes ahead of time to keep the suspense. Or if someone occasionally says something particularly clever or funny. Um, Now, when Joel goes to get the votes, something you don't know probably, he doesn't just bring them out in the order that they were written. He
That was my
pre-organized.
question. This is
Yes.
what I was going to ask you.
Yes.
How? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So he and maybe a producer organize them for maximum tension.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And so then he brings them out, and it's Richard, Richard, Shy, Leilani, Richard. And the remaining votes were Richard or else, but that by that point they didn't need to say them. So we say goodbye to Richard, who I believe is your fellow Scot.
I know it was one of the first things I noticed. I thought, oh, a Scottish voice, but no more. Although, it's not until the second episode that I realised there are two other Scottish people as well. I just
Hey.
didn't hear them in episode one. But yes, poor Richard, off he goes. I definitely, even from this first tribal council, could begin to understand why there's so much, probably more as the season goes on, why there will be so much kind of strategy and gameplay involved. Because the obvious thing it seems like you have to do is vote out who was the poorest in the mission, the challenge. But of course, that's not really what you're going to have to end up doing at all. You're not really going to base your votes on who's the strongest physically. Because now that I know there's all these other elements that actually you're going to have to vote based on all sorts of other alliances and who's just really annoying, and also who do you not want to annoy, and there's all sorts of other things that are probably going to come into play. So it's not as straightforward a vote as it seems, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we'll see that more in episode 2 here in a moment. I do want to say, and this is nothing against Richard, but the picture of him that is on the BBC website, he looks like a criminal on Annika. The jacket he's wearing, the mugshot look on his face.
I'm look. I can see it right now.
Yeah.
He doesn't look very happy, but
No, he does not.
Do you know what? Scottish people, sometimes we just are unhappy. Look, he's not used to that much sunlight and vitamin D. He's in shock. He's on an island. He's never seen sunlight like this. I can relate to that. So, yes, I get it. I get it, Richard.
So in his final words, this is something you'll sometimes see in Survivor. He suggested some people don't want to play the game against the strongest. Richard, I'm sorry, you were not the strongest. And I'm not just talking about the fact that you dropped the weights. People like to talk themselves up. Oh, they obviously got rid of me because I was a big threat. No, that's not the reason they got rid of you. And so, there are other reasons. And like you said, alliances play the biggest role in it, or in this case, more like who Nathan didn't like, which will lead to alliances. And so, yeah. And then at the end of it, the tribe got their Flint, which is the way it has typically been on Survivor until what's called the new era, the 41 and up. And then you get Flint if you win it. And then if you lose an immunity challenge, you also lose your Flint. So it's like a double punishment.
Okay.
You have no Flint until you win a challenge again, the immunity challenge again.
Yeah. So I also thought if I had stuck around, if I was still there, if Joel hadn't given me that Flint, I would have set my clothes on fire with one of the torches and just taken that back to camp. I would be like, I am not doing one more night without fire. Sorry.
And that is actually, it's funny because that's a topic that we've been discussing on US Survivor, because one tribe went like 7-8 days without fire. And yeah, you're not allowed to do that. I mean, like your torches usually get left behind. It looks like you're walking with them and everything, but they're not really. Yeah. And they're not allowed to use them to start the fires. So, whatever else it is, and you can't like light a stick in the fire that's at tribal council and be like, oh, I'm going to bring this back.
Fine.
Yeah, I know. It's rough. So we can move on to the second episode unless you have any other questions about the first.
No, me setting myself on fire was my last note.
Okay. All right. So the second episode starts on day 4, and Shai said that seeing his name at tribal council was scary, so he's planning to take a step back. Yeah, good idea. Nathan and Tanuke have this bond now, and he takes credit for the vote. We get his official intro package now, which like we said, he's a fitness instructor. Um, at and of course they do start their fire so they can actually make rice and beans. At Lanena, they're still cocky, singing, celebrating, except for Ashley because she hurt her hand in that challenge and she's worried about it. And then there's Tree Mail. There's a reward challenge. Now, before we go to the reward challenge, we meet Doug, who says Survivor is a lot like fishing. You have to be prepared and patient. Okay, I'll go with that. So they go to the challenge, and this is when Lanena finds out Richard was voted out when Calaton walks in. So did you realize that's how they would know? And what do you think about the fact that they won't know like the whys of it, possibly until they just watch the show?
Yeah, it hadn't really occurred to me that they wouldn't know who had gone. So at that moment, yeah, I was kind of discovering it for the first time. But I noticed they seemed, well, at least some of them were shocked. They were like, "Oh my God, Richard's gone!" And I thought, "Are you that surprised?" It's not that shocking. Like he lost the challenge. Like it was either going to be him or Leilani, surely. Like so why some of them were going, Richard's gone. Like I thought it's not a big shock. Come on.
Yeah,
But yes.
I think that they probably were expecting Leilani because he was holding up two for a while before he ended up dropping. But yes, the surprise sometimes, you don't know what's going on at the other tribe. You have no idea.
Yeah.
And so it's always funny when there are the shocked faces of, oh my gosh. And what's even funnier is when people start to, in their own heads, determine what they think is going on in other tribes. There was
Yeah.
a well-known U.S. Survivor season called Heroes versus Villains, and it was returning players. And the heroes, they determined that because of the voting order, they knew exactly what was going on the villains tribe, and that a women's alliance had taken control, and they were voting out all the men. And it absolutely was not happening that way. It was just coincidence that, the way things were happening.
Yeah.
But it was just really funny. And then there were other actions that occurred because of that, which were even funnier. But yeah, I mean, they're just sitting around on an island all day. They have plenty of time to come up with scenarios.
Yeah.
Um,
Is Heroes and Villains was Sari on that season?
yes, she was.
Okay. Now I know someone from Survivor.
Yes. That was one of the seasons she was on.
Okay.
Was
she on 3 or 4?
Oh gosh, you're not supposed to quiz me like that. 3 or 4. Yes, we're gonna go with 3 or 4.
More than 2.
4, I believe.
Anyway.
1, 2. I think 4. Oh my gosh! Now my Survivor credentials are going to come into question here. But I wasn't ready for a quiz. But she's unfortunately probably about to get booted from Big Brother. So,
oh no,
after 90 days, whatever. But so anyway, for this challenge, it's players to race down a slide, so slide down a slide and grab what he called a ball. Now, the funny thing was, I saw on Twitter some other people saying, like, does ball mean something different in the UK? Because that's not a ball.
No, it was not.
I called it like a rope ball, I guess. I don't know what else you would call it.
Yeah, it was like a parcel, a package. Yeah, it was like all tied up. Yeah.
And they have to fight one-on-one to get that into their goal area. When I say fight, we saw them. It's physical there. And
yeah, it's really dangerous. This is also very much like one of the tasks on that show, Physical 100, almost the exact same thing, 2 people fighting over an object, a ball, if you will. Yeah, it's this challenge is it's dangerous, and also, why do they have to oil up and slide down a chute at the start? Why can't they just start in the sand?
I mean, the oiling up is clearly to get more viewers. Is that
just the gratuitous part? In fact, This is when I was in this meeting with the executive producer, Stephen Lovelock. This is the clip that they showed us. They showed us this clip of Nathan and Doug And so this was my first introduction to Survivor UK. I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and also very uncomfortable watching it in a room with other people around a table. So yes, this that came back to me this moment.
I mean,
But
there is a fairly well known U.S. Survivor moment where a gravedigger, very muscular guy, has to oil up to be on. Go. He's not sliding down; he's sliding horizontally. They run and then they like do a slip and slide.
yeah,
But yes, there's a very well known moment of him doing that, and so I think they were just trying to recreate that there.
okay, fair
Uh,
enough.
so the the So they go down, the first one, Christopher wins. Okay. The next one, I don't know what Ren was doing. She like slid down on her butt like a little kid in a puddle. Instead of going head first, sliding down like Superman or something like that. So she had no chance there.
Yeah,
Then we had Lawrence versus Hannah, which I was surprised to see, man versus woman.
yeah, me
Uh,
too.
but I guess they allowed it, and Lawrence won. Then we had Tanuke versus Rach, and Rach won that one pretty easily. Shy versus Lee. Shy, here's why you had the slide. Shy, so the bag, ball, whatever, didn't make it very far out. And so it was on the slide. So those two had slid past it and then they had to run by. But of course, it's still oiled up. So Shy goes running in there and just goes down hard on the slide. And then Lee, being Lee, like grabbed it, ran to his goal, and before putting it in, taunted Shy. Like,
Yeah,
this is even worse than the whole tribe taunting. This is one-on-one taunting someone. And it's like, okay, if you two are still together at the merge, do you think he's going to want to work with you? Because I'm thinking no.
yeah, too much, Lee. Calm down.
Yeah.
It stood out to me as well
Yeah.
as a bit annoying.
Yeah. Then, of course, we had Nathan versus Doug. And this was, quite a lot of fighting. And I was sure Nathan was going to win it, but Doug had better
Yeah,
technique and eventually got loose and won it for Lenena.
yeah, I was really amazed that Doug won, or Underdog, as Joel names him.
Yes. Yeah.
So nice nickname. Yeah, I was really surprised that he managed to beat Nathan here.
Yeah. So,
But then he is Scottish, so
well, that
we're
explains it.
hardy
Yes.
people.
Um, and of course, now we know why we got the intro clip of Doug fishing just before the challenge, because he gets to teach them all how to use the gear and they head to the water.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we get to see a little discussion of who might go if they lose later. Hannah tells Christopher that she's worried about Ashley's hand injury, which leads Christopher to immediately run back and tell Ashley, Doug, and Ren. So there's the beginnings of an alliance forming here.
Yeah.
Day 5, we get at Calaton, we get a segment on how dirty and smelly they are. Now, this is something that would never be on US Survivor because it's assumed that you know that. The only time you hear about how bad they smell is when they used to have loved ones visits, which stopped with COVID and haven't restarted. And the fresh and clean loved one would come up and the stinky Survivor player would be like, oh, ignore how bad I smell. Other than that, they really almost never talk about it. But I think it's, I take it for granted. Longtime viewers take it for granted. But I think it's to remind the new UK viewers.
Yeah, I think so. That makes sense to me because again, I don't know how much is real here. I don't know, like, are they really given food though behind the scenes, and do they all really have a shower and deals? I don't know to what extent they genuinely are on this island fending for themselves. So yeah, as a new audience member,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the extent of the circumstances. So yeah, they I think they're aiming it, like you said earlier, they're
Right.
aiming it at me, at people who don't know the show.
Right. Right.
And someone is in the camp. Someone is hacking a coconut with like a machete,
Yeah.
and I'm quite terrified. Like that's dangerous. I was
I mean,
scared.
it's common, that, yeah, they just, they hack away at those things. And it's it's funny because when I visited Hawaii with my family, and we went and we bought a coconut, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna open this coconut, and oh, it did not go well. My kids were making fun of me. I didn't have a machete, I just had a knife, but
Okay.
yeah, I was, you know,
I
trying
thought
to open it.
thought you were going to say, and that's the story of how I lost my finger.
No, I do have a friend who he was a Boy Scout leader, and he had a machete, and he was teaching his Boy Scouts. And this is why you're careful so you don't accidentally. And yes, he chopped off the top of one of
No.
his fingers from
Oh,
the joint.
that's
Yes.
hideous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the waivers these contestants must have to sign,
Oh, yes.
not just the machetes, but even the challenge when they're rolling around and fighting. Like it's so physical. There must be so much legal safeguards to that
Oh, yeah.
these people aren't going to sue, and there must be so much medical assistance on set at any time because there's so much that could go wrong in this show.
Oh, yeah. And in Australian Survivor, it's even worse. I mean, Australian Survivor, in like a very, very early challenge, in you had to go over this kind of rolling barrel. Except, I mean, it was stationary, but it rolled. And two players at the same time face planted directly into mud. One broke her collarbone and was out. The other had huge bruises on his face, and
Mm.
I mean, he had a scar months after the show was over still, and he got to come back mostly because he
Yikes.
begged to come back. And so yeah, I mean, there have been injuries. There are, I don't know if they'll have them. There are blindfold challenges where they have to maneuver. A caller tells people where to go on an obstacle course, and inevitably there's the balls shots there. One time, a whole crate fell on someone's head from that. There have been in these types of wrestling challenges in a very early episode, someone dislocated their shoulder.
Mhm.
I mean, so yeah, there can be injuries from this. Now, U.S. Survivor has backed off a little bit on these one-on-one, straight-out combat things, but Australian Survivor has not. So
Yeah, scary stuff.
yeah. Now, going back to the tribes at Lanena, Sabrina brings up Ashley's name to Doug and Pegleg and Lee, who all sort of agree. So she tries to form the basis of an alliance with them, and they all promise to let each other know if they hear their name. And then we get the Sabrina intro package. She is a 45-year-old ultra marathon runner. So yeah, that's great if she's running long distances. Now, Pegleg doesn't have a great opinion of Rach, who he says moans and complains. We see her upset about getting a fly in her eye. I talked
Oh
about a
yeah.
bug in the ear. There's the fly in the eye.
Yeah. She says she has a phobia of things going in her eyes. And I sort of thought, I don't think anyone likes things going in their
Yeah,
eyes. It's not just you.
it's not so much a phobia. It's just normal.
Yeah.
Um, Lee says he's focused on performance. Rach says Sabrina annoys a lot of people and is very loud, which is particularly funny because in her interview on the BBC website, she said she believed her social skills would help her immensely in the game, as well as her nurturing maternal side. She has been doing a very good job of hiding those from what we've and she also said her strategy coming in was to dull her personality and be silent. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I should mention, I don't think I mentioned this earlier. I think, you and I have talked about it, but normally the interviews are done pregame. Did I mention this earlier or not? I can't remember anymore.
Not on the nope, just
Okay.
to
Just
me,
to
but
you.
not on the podcast.
And so they talk about like, this is how I plan to play. And then you can compare it. For some reason, the BBC did these interviews post game. So all these people are looking back with some 2020 hindsight. I mean, obviously, Sabrina's hindsight is not 2020, but Even so, when you look at these interviews, some of them are like, how did you think you would do in terms of surviving on no food? And Richards was like, oh, I did great. Yeah, you were only there for 3 days, you know?
Yes, I mean that's quite strange just in general for any reality TV
Mm-hmm.
show. They always, when they do interviews or confessionals, they always ask them, like speak in present tense,
Right.
talk like it's happening right now or about to happen. So yeah, it's very weird to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, these were put out as pregame, but they're post-game, really. So it's
Yeah.
definitely weird. Um, so I'm not really looking at them until each person gets voted out because I'm
Okay.
afraid there could be spoilery things in there that they
Yeah.
accidentally say. Um, so we move to the next challenge, the immunity challenge, and this is one I haven't, quite seen before. Um, and it's the type I prefer, where there's several different elements as opposed to just like standing there holding a weight. There's rowing, swimming, untying knots, lots of untying knots on Survivor, working as a team. And so Ashley has to sit out to even up the tribes due to her hand, because I guess she may have been told by medical, you can't get it wet. They don't really say, there's a couple other things that suggest that, but they make it sound like it's a decision.
Yeah.
Um, and so they go in, they row. Sabrina and Rach go to untie knots and they can't do it. They're terrible. And they fall behind so badly that Sabrina, who says, never quit, quits.
I know.
And she swaps out, and then Rach does too. And then a couple of the guys go in there and they finish up. So Calaton is more than halfway up their tower of stacking logs. Now I have this is another thing I've never seen before, is actually stacking logs like this. So I thought it was really interesting. I also think the way Lanena does it at the end is good, although it didn't work the first time, and almost put them back tied with Calaton by knocking down logs. But eventually Calaton wins immunity. Now, the problem here is that this result was spoiled by the previews of episode 1. You wouldn't have noticed it, but they said, what happens in, who goes to tribal council? And they showed a clip of people dipping their torches in the fire. The only time you dip your torch in the fire is your first time at tribal council.
Ah, okay.
So
Okay.
by having that clip in the episode at the end of episode 1, I knew who was going to tribal council in
Okay.
episode 2.
I see.
It's like,
This is
thanks,
why,
thanks, guys.
in general, I just never watch for any reality show, any
Mm-hmm.
competition show, when they show you these little clips of what's going to happen next week. And I know they're supposed to be designed not to spoil anything, but
Mm-hmm.
I think things slip through, and I just don't want to see because I know I probably when I'm watching the next episode. I
Right.
will have little memories of, wait a minute, I saw this in the preview, so I just
Yeah.
don't watch them. I don't need to watch them.
Yeah. And actually, I was warned to avoid the opening of episode 1
Oh,
started
as
with
was
a bunch of
I.
preview stuff. And I was warned, don't look at that too closely. So I didn't. I mean, I watched it, but I was warned because apparently there's some spoilery stuff in there as well.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I think I saw it on Twitter or something.
Mm-hmm.
Someone saying the exact same thing. So I also just skipped the sort of this
Yeah.
season and Survivor
Right.
montage. I just thought I don't need it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So, getting back to this, Lanena gets back to camp. Sabrina apologizes for herself and for Rach, although Rach didn't ask her to
Yes.
apologize for her.
Yes, I
And
loved it. She says, I apologize that Rachel and I, as a pair, weren't
yeah,
able to untie all the knots. So sneaky.
yeah. And she even told us that she was, I don't want to go down alone. I'm trying to drag Rach down too. And it's like, yeah, could you have been more transparent about that? Um, I guess in honor of Matthew Perry, I should say, could you have been more transparent with that?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But the thing is, though, although that was sort of ridiculous of Sabrina, Rachel then says something And I thought, well, wait a minute. Hold on. She says she's talking to the camera, or she's giving an interview, and she says Sabrina only cares about herself. All she wants is to get to the end. And I thought, well, yeah, of
Thank you.
course.
Oh, I'm
Of,
so glad you picked up on that
yeah, I
because
thought,
yes, that is
of course
one
she
of
wants to get to the end. That's
yes,
what everyone wants, is it
that's
not?
yeah. I one thing I have is what she says that annoys me, and that exact quote because yes, that is the way this game works. You cannot split the money. It is not your whole tribe. It is £100,000 to one person. And so, yes, I'm so glad you picked up on that because that is one of my biggest pet peeves on these reality shows. U.S. Big Brother has been, people have been saying it on there this whole season too. You know, like, oh, they're not a team player. Yeah, that's because you're not a team.
Yeah.
You know, and more in Survivor where you're broken up into tribes, there is that encouragement of get the tribe further. But even in the tribe phase, you have to look out for yourself. You have to look out for number one. And so sometimes Jeff Probst will say that on US Survivor. He'll be like, so have we gotten to the point yet? This is in Tribal Council, where you're thinking about yourself as an individual as opposed to a tribe. Like, no, Jeff, they should always be thinking that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you act like you
right.
are a team player, but your true everyone's true motivation is surely the same thing. So to be annoyed at someone for
Mhm.
only wanting to get to the end is a little bit silly, I think.
Yes, yes. Um, Now, also, then Rach talks to Ashley and Doug about how to turn things on Sabrina. Ashley brings up their prior discussions with the three of them and Ren and Christopher, and Doug agrees. And so if they all stay true, well, that's five, and that's good enough to get rid of Sabrina. But Doug tells us he's not sure. And this, again, the same thing we were talking about. He's like, well, if she stays and he votes for her, she could turn people against him. Okay, then get all five of your people to vote against her, and you won't have to worry about that. Um, and if that doesn't work, lie. Ren herself is worried about Ashley's hand. And it's interesting because I noticed that Ashley is a bit pushy about things when she talks to them. Like she's clearly worried and she's getting a bit pushy. And stop it. You're going to hurt your own cause there. So Doug is apparently the swing vote. He has to go back to the other group and either keep up appearances or get together with them. And he tells Sabrina she's the target. Now, as we head to Tribal Council, I still expect Sabrina to go. I just felt like Doug was more comfortable talking with the first group.
Yeah, yeah,
And
so
like
did I.
when they asked him, when the second group said, who are you voting? Who did you tell them you were voting for? He was like, oh, I didn't answer. So he's lying to one group.
Yeah.
That's never a good sign. And then when Sabrina started talking at Tribal Council, I really wanted her to go because she was talking about, I came to play with honesty and integrity. And it's like, oh, just stop it. Those have very little to do with this game unless you are using them to fool people. Those are the only times. Now, she was a little bit, but I don't know, like when she was trying to drag Rachel down, what was honest and, what did integrity have to do with any of that? It seemed hypocritical. If she had told us, I am purposely pretending to be, this way, great. That's what I like. I have a shirt that I helped create that says on the front, honesty, integrity, loyalty. And on the back, it says scheme and plot because you scheme and plot behind people's backs.
Yes. I realize that for the sake of the podcast, this won't mean much to listeners, but David, I'm going to paste to you in the chat my notes for this section. My notes were, I quoted Sabrina and I wrote, I made a promise I was going to play with honesty and integrity. Ding, ding, ding on the David radar. I knew this bit would annoy you when I was watching, and I was right.
You were right. Yes. So yeah. That suggests I may have talked about that before once or twice or 100 times. So then she basically goes straight after Ashley. But she also says you have to surround yourselves with people who will give 100% in every challenge. But as Ashley pointed out earlier, the reason she hurt herself was giving 100%. So Sabrina should theoretically be applauding her, not targeting her. And then
Yeah.
Ashley made the same comparison I was going to, saying if a player gets injured on a sports team, you don't just chuck them out. And in fact, that's why there are, I mean, like for contracts, playing American football, baseball, whatever, you want them to try their hardest. So they still get paid, even if, I mean, even if they injure themselves in the first play of the first game of the season, they still get paid whatever their guaranteed salary was. There's other, bits and pieces, of course, but the other thing is, she says you don't just chuck them out. Well, sometimes you do, and eventually that person, if they're repeatedly injured or something, they get chucked out. But yeah, not on the first vote here. Now, Lee brought up Rach for the swimming and not untying. And it was really weird because he made excuses for Sabrina giving up quicker. He was like, well, because she gave up quicker, that allowed someone else to get in there. So it's like, I don't understand. On the one hand, you're supposed to give 100%, but on the other hand, you're supposed to just give up quicker.
Yeah, it's a little bit contradictory. And there's also this sort of weird interaction between Rachel and maybe it's Peg. Is it Pegleg? Is that who's talking?
That was Lee.
Oh, Lee. Sorry. Between Rachel and Lee,
yes,
about whether or not she volunteered to be a swimmer, and she says this thing that makes no sense to me. She says, I think he says, "Well, you asked to be a swimmer," and she says, "I didn't ask to be a swimmer. I volunteered." And I just wrote, "Huh? Like, why is that different?" She's going, "No, I said I wouldn't mind being a swimmer. That's not the same thing as saying I wanted to swim." And I thought, come on, like let's get real.
Splitting hairs. I mean, I understand what she was saying, but it was a very, very fine hair to split. It's like, I didn't come out and say, put me in, I want to do it. I said, well, if no one else wants to, I will. I don't know. Maybe Sabrina specifically had said, I want to do it. And that's the point that she was trying to get at.
I guess. We just didn't I imagine Sabrina probably did say that. So
yeah, because she probably was like, I'm a ultra marathoner. I can hold my breath for long times, and so but so then okay, we move on and we get to the votes. And Pegleg votes Rach. Hannah votes Ashley. And immediately I know that Sabrina is going because it meant that group was not really an alliance. And there was a split in there. Yeah. And I wondered about that when earlier we saw a clip of Pegleg talking about Rach. So Joel reads the votes. Sabrina, Ashley, Rach, Sabrina. And then there was another one we didn't see for Sabrina. So the anti-Sabrina alliance did hold together, as I thought. And so it wouldn't have mattered whether or not the other group voted as a unit. But they were really dumb not to. They had zero chance of getting their way, splitting the votes the way they did. It's clear they're not really an alliance. They truly were what they had talked about, which is, I'll let you know if someone is coming for you. And they didn't organize their own votes, which, we were talking earlier about who were the people who probably knew Survivor coming in and who didn't. I would say most of the people in the actual alliance know Survivor coming in, and the people who threw their votes in different directions probably did not.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. And I, like you, I assumed that Sabrina would go, but because of the editing, the way that I think they deliberately tried to make us think for a moment maybe she wasn't going to go. But then the vote comes out, and I thought, oh no, it's just exactly what I thought would happen. But they tried to swerve us away from that by selecting certain clips, but no.
Yeah, there's always this suspense element that they want built in. It got bad in Survivor, US Survivor, the past few years, where literally you would have no idea which way it was going because they select, and it was like, look, you don't have to keep the suspense up that much. No one is turning the channel, just because, we don't know we know who's going to go. Now in US Survivor, they're now hour and a half episodes, which that's with commercials. So it's, closer to basically the length of the UK version here. But
Yeah.
they have more time to put things in, so it's more obvious. Or at least the explanation. I won't say it's obvious going, but it's the explanation is there. So you're not scratching your head like, what just happened here? Which, as someone who normally does a podcast called Why Blank Lost, I didn't mind that they hid who it was, because then people had to listen to find out. But now I just have more material to use to explain it. But yeah, they will always use misleading clips to try to do it, and they do things like, when they do their confessionals, the producer will ask them questions. Now, we, of course, almost never see the producer asking the question, but they'll go through the different things like, why would you vote for Rach? And then the person will say, well, I would vote for Rach because of this. Why would you vote for Ashley? Well, I would vote for Ashley because of this. And so they have all the clips of them saying why they would vote for a certain person, no matter which way they want to show it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in this case, like Pegleg did say, he was annoyed with Rach and he voted Rach. So it was, I think, fairly, straightforward at the end.
Yeah.
Because Lee also had said something similar. Now, I did mention Sabrina's BBC interview earlier. And so another question that was asked was what she learned from being on the show. And she said, and again, this is a post thing that you wouldn't normally get. She said to never, ever change herself or dull her shine to make others feel comfortable being around her and in order for her to fit in, which is exactly the opposite lesson she should have learned in terms of the game.
Yeah, it's this funny thing that I notice contestants in these shows doing an awful lot. It happens quite often on in some versions of the traitors, like Australian and Canada, when on social media they will show you clips of the banished or the murdered person on the car ride home, and they'll ask them, would you change anything about your game? And so many of them go, I don't regret anything. I wouldn't change anything. And I think, you just lost. Why are you saying you think you played a good game and you wouldn't change anything? Like, no, you're supposed to say, yeah, actually, I'm an idiot and here's why I lost. This is what I would have changed. What's the point in saying I don't regret anything about my gameplay? So yeah, same thing here.
Yeah, see, this is why we're good podcasting together, because it's the same for me. It is a pet peeve forever that I have had of saying that, and that's why I enjoyed when I interviewed Melissa B. A little cross promotion here of the the Traders Canada, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I could tell you all the different things I did wrong,"
Yeah, yeah.
So that was
unless your aim was not to win, unless you truly were like, do you know what? I didn't care if I won. I just wanted to have fun and amazing experience. So I don't care that I'm out. But I can't imagine that applies to many players who go through the entire casting process to get on a show like this, to then not desperately want to win and be mad at themselves that they didn't win.
Yeah. So, all right. So then, I mean, that wraps things up for the second episode. It was interesting as we watched. I think Joel has most of the typical Survivor sayings down pat. You'll get to know them as we go along. They were immediately familiar to me. Do you have any questions that we haven't gotten to yet?
I have a question about the vote reveals at Tribal Council. Is it a normal part of the format to only, when the players go up and write down the name of the person they're voting for and they hold it up and they whisper, stage whisper about why they're voting? We only see, well, in these two episodes, we only see some of the players. Some of them, it's a secret. Does that always happen? That they pick and choose who they're going to show? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. It's only if they make like a funny comment that. Now they show them at the end. At the end of the episode, if you watch long enough, you see all of the votes held up. You just don't hear what they're saying. They used to provide clips on U.S. Survivor afterwards showing what everybody said. They stopped doing that.
Okay.
And now it's just you see them holding it up. So anything else?
I had one more question, but you really answered it. I also wondered how constructed the vote reveal is. Because
Hmm.
I thought, is Joel really pulling out these random pieces of
No.
paper? Surely not. So yeah, I imagine producers take it away.
Yeah.
They figure out, just again like in Traitors, when they
Hmm.
decide how to reveal the votes around the round table, they'll figure out what's the most exciting way to reveal these to keep the suspense going as long as possible. So yeah, I sort of guessed it wasn't. It was constructed the way Joel
Right.
revealed.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, what about, do you have any early favorites or people you don't love a whole lot on the show?
The jury's out on Lawrence. I need to see. I can understand he's probably going to say some quite funny stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but I I'm very biased here. I'll admit it. I'm rooting for Doug,
Hmm.
fellow Scott. Um, so and he's just someone that by the end of the second episode I could remember who he was. Like I still don't know everybody's names,
Right.
but Doug I knew who he was probably because Joel gave him his nickname, the Underdog. Uh, other than that, I don't know anyone. Actually, Pegleg. I kind of like him because, again, in some ways, maybe he's a bit of an underdog because compared to the average
Hmm.
age, he's a little bit older. So
Right.
that just sort of instantly makes me want to see him do well. Other than that, I need more time, I think, to get to know them. What about you?
Okay. I mean, I like Doug also, not because he's a Scot, just because I like the fact that he was playing the game. He was in between the groups. He, seems
Yeah.
like a good guy. I do like Lawrence. I find him amusing. We'll see if that continues. I like Pegleg as a person, as a game player, not so much because as we saw, I mean, he couldn't accomplish what he wanted to accomplish there. I am not particularly fond of Lee for reasons that we already discussed, like taunting Shy, and just in general, his attitude seems to be more of this is a physical competition, and I'm used to getting my way type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Nathan, I'm on, I could go either way with Nathan because he did make the good strategic move in getting things early against Richard. But on the other hand, he also seems to be a muscles are everything type of guy. So we'll have to see how that goes. He can change my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so there we have it. The first two episodes of Survivor UK. We will be back every week, as we mentioned. So we're doing, in case it wasn't clear already, one episode of the podcast for two episodes of the TV show. And so for people who want to get in touch with us, let me give you my information, and then Matthew will give the general information. So I'm all over social media and reality TV podcasting. As I've mentioned, I podcast about both Survivor and Big Brother on the Rob Has a Podcast Network, with the name of the show being Why Blank Lost. And of course, I'm podcasting The Traders Canada right here. So make sure to subscribe here to get all of that. And of course, as I mentioned, I recently interviewed the trader, Melissa B. And that was a lot of fun. She's great. You can also find my various contact accounts on my Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in Linktree. Or you can find me at most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. On video platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram as at David Bloomberg TV. And Threads is also at David Bloomberg TV because it's connected to Instagram. Now, speaking of those video platforms, I post about 3 or 4 reality TV short videos on all those sites every day, including what I mentioned earlier, the mini Why Blank Losts will go there. Probably before this podcast is even published, I will have Why Richard Lost out there. So you can go and see, the official answer. Of course, we gave a lot of detail here, so you could probably figure it out. But still go look at the official answer and follow me there. And I also do Traders Canada there, U.S. Survivor, U.S. Big Brother, House of Villains, you name it.
And as the name of this podcast probably suggests, the trader is generally devoted to the traitors. So, as well as David's covering the Traitors Canada right now, If you go back to old episodes, the Trader has covered Traitors US, Traitors UK, both seasons of Traitors Australia, and I will be covering the forthcoming season of the Traitors UK on its way very soon. Most recently, I have been interviewing some of the contestants from Traitors Australia Season 2, including just this morning or yesterday, I think I uploaded an interview with Blake. Now, Blake, no spoilers, Blake is a very important player in Traitors Australia Season 2, and he gave his first podcast interview to the Trader. He hasn't really done any other press or podcast interviews at all, so a lot of people have been really excited to hear that. You can find the Trader on social media on Instagram at the Trader Podcast or on X at the Trader Pod. Or you can get in touch about the Traitors or about Survivor UK by emailing me at what's the email address? The Trader Podcast at gmail.com. There we go.
That's email, not tree mail. Yes.
Not tree mail.
Yes. But if you would, also, if you'd like to help Matthew here in supporting the publishing of this podcast and all the other podcasts, you could drop him a few bucks into his. I was trying to think of oh yeah, I have a link tree. I could have a link tree mail, but anyway, sorry, tangent. You can go to the Buy Me a Coffee basically website at ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley. So, if you're enjoying it, throw him a couple bucks. And I don't know, Matthew, do you have anything else?
No, we're all good for now. I think we've covered everything, and I'm excited to keep going now. I want to see what happens next. I want to get into the next few episodes.
All right. Well, we will be back here in 1 week, so you can find us on for this podcast. I will, of course, be on the Trader sooner than that and elsewhere as well. So we will see you everywhere. Bye.
Bye bye.